Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of webinars from Tines. Today we'll be talking about secrets engines and how to integrate that with Tines. Specifically, we'll be talking about HashiCorp Vault and integrations with 1Password. I'm Chris Kohanek, one of the sales engineers here at Tines. Our agenda for this webinar, we'll start out with a quick introduction to Tines, just to get you acquainted with Tines if you're not already familiar with the platform. We will then take a look at secrets, why they're important, and how we use them in Tines in order to perform integrations with a number of different tools. Then we'll take a specific look at 1Password and HashiCorp Vault. Take a look at the prerequisites that are needed in order to do an integration with Tines. Then we'll take a look at how we manage secrets in those secrets engines like 1Password and HashiCorp Vault, how we address them as an external resource from Tines. Then how do we make that process just a bit easier? Tines is a great automation tool. Why don't we use Tines in order to automate some of those processes that might be a little bit tedious in getting them set up? So let's get started. We think of Tines as a radically different approach to automation that allows security and IT teams to automate any workflow regardless of the complexity. Any tool that has an API is fair game for us. We're happy to use anything that has an API, and we use that to integrate a number of different tools into workflows. What do those workflows look like? Tines uses a whiteboard-style interface and only 7 actions in order to compose our automations. We call these automations stories, and whether you've heard terms like runbooks or playbooks or automations, they're all synonyms for what we call stories. And only 7 actions are needed in order to compose these stories. These are made up by some input actions, like receiving a webhook from an alert source, maybe from an EDR source or something similar. Receiving an email as a way to kick off an automation, very handy for phishing use cases where we're receiving an email that looks suspicious and we break that email apart and find out any of the constituent parts as observables to go and act upon. Or we're pulling data from another source periodically using an HTTP request. This might be a source that has alerts stacked up, and then we just need to pull them in order to get the data from that source. You'll notice that HTTP requests do a lot of work for us, since these are the APIs that we use in order to connect all of these tools together in our workflow. So whether this is periodically getting data from an alert source or sending messages to some system like a ticketing system in Jira or Salesforce, whether that is taking some actions like sending messages through Slack or Microsoft Teams in order to alert teams that something is happening, or whether we're taking actions like affecting firewall rules, invalidating sessions, closing off users' access if those users or those sessions look suspicious. All of these things are being done by HTTP requests, so we're going to use those an awful lot. If you need us to send an email, we're happy to send an email as an output. And we have a number of actions that allow us to transform data, loop through data, make some logical choices about the paths that we take. We do that through the trigger action. And we're able to reuse stories within other stories that allow us to better manage the workflows that we put together. Just these 7 actions allow us to take a lot of actions and put together any of the automations that we need to. So let's say I am getting in an alert from one of my EDR sources, and then we want to break apart that message, maybe get all of the IP addresses and look up those IP addresses in VirusTotal. Make a decision based on what we received from VirusTotal, and then message somebody in Slack. We're able to do that pretty easily by using templates. Now, We could start out by using just these actions all by themselves and setting them up manually. But it's a lot easier if we start with a pre-configured action. Those pre-configured actions are what we call templates. So it may be that I'm going to use a pre-configured template in order to extract all the IP addresses using some regex. We have written the regex for you, so you don't have to. And what did we say? We wanted to use VirusTotal to look up some IP addresses that we've extracted from this message that we got. And then if that issue looks like it's something that might be malicious, then we maybe send a Slack to one of our users to let them know that this is something that needs immediate attention. So very quickly, we can, if you can really whiteboard a process, we're able to be able to create a workflow that makes that happen. I wanted to draw attention to this VirusTotal. One of the things that really allows us to talk to other systems and be able to use them effectively is having credentials and secrets in order to make that happen. Now, if you're a first-time user to Tines, you may see, okay, great, I need to look up something in VirusTotal. I need an API key. Okay, great. I'm going to go to VirusTotal. I'm going to go to my user. I've got my API key. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to put that right into the payload that I send to VirusTotal. This is not what you want to do. Why is that? Well, it leaves your API key kind of hanging out here in plain text in your workflow. There is a much better way to do that. So this brings us to the topic of secrets, which is really why we're here today. So what is a secret? Well, it's any information that we want to keep tight control over. It could take the form of that API key that I tried to paste in plain text into the action of my story, but it could be other items. It could be encryption keys, it could be passwords, it could be certificates. All these things we want to keep control over and not necessarily in the hands of just anybody who happens to read our story. The way that we manage these secrets in Tines is through credentials. Credentials are placeholders for your secrets in Tines actions. We're going to securely store that information in Tines key management system, and it can be shared to other teams as needed without necessarily giving those other teams access to the information itself. So what do these credentials look like in Tines itself? Well, they can take a number of different forms. So if I were to say new credential, well, it could take the form of text. It could be, and that's useful for things like the API key that I just tried to paste into my story, but it could be other things like AWS credentials. It could be JOTS or OAuth credentials. It could be mutual TLS credentials. Or we can also retrieve that information through an HTTP request. And that's going to be useful in a little bit when we go to automate going and grabbing that information from something like HashiCorp Vault or through 1Password. So when we create a credential, let's say we create a credential like we'll call this one webinar for VirusTotal. And this is where I really should have pasted that API key. That way we can use that in a story. That way, instead of using the API key just in its raw text form, we can create we can call that placeholder for that credential and webinar VirusTotal. So you can see that instead of it being just in plain text, now it's something that is masked away from the user. So somebody can use that credential in their story without actually knowing that credential or that secret in and of itself. So this is a secure way and a very orderly way of managing secrets within Tines. Now, you may have secrets already in 1Password or in HashiCorp Vault, and you may not want to maintain those secrets in two different places. I don't necessarily want to have it in 1Password and also make sure it's in Tines as a credential as well. It may be something that is a credential that rolls frequently. It might be subject to invalidation or rolling frequently. And I don't necessarily want Tines and that automation to break as a result of me changing that item in 1Password. It may be that you have team members that are using that credential or that secret, and they may inadvertently change an API key all on their own. They may do what they think is the right thing to do, which is change it in 1Password or in HashiCorp Vault, and forget that it also needs to be changed in Tines as well. So that's one of the important reasons why you may want to go and retrieve that information on the fly from those two key management systems rather than storing it in and of itself in Tines. So let's talk about what we need in either 1Password or in HashiCorp Vault in order to connect this with Tines. So prerequisites are different for each system. Let's take HashiCorp Vault first. First thing you need is a Vault server. It seems fairly obvious that you will need that. And there will also need to be some mounts that you have access to and some secrets in those mounts. So a token that provides you access to those mounts and those secrets is going to be needed as well. And I'm going to mention, kind of as a disclaimer here, some of the examples that you're going to see here are test services that I've created for myself for this webinar and for development purposes and are of development quality. They may not represent the most secure practices, so be sure to read and understand all the information and the documentation for each of these systems in order to make sure that you're doing things in a secure manner. Let's also talk about 1Password and their prerequisites. Couple more things that we need to do in 1Password. In addition to simply having an account, we're going to need vaults with secrets that we want to share with users of Tines. It may be one vault, it may be several vaults that we want to create automations for. The second thing that we need is vault access credits. Now, with 1Password, the access and to the automation is governed by your subscription level. So you want to take a look at how much automation or how many credits are available to your subscription. The third thing that you're going to need is a 1Password Connect server. 1Password, and let me give that disclaimer one more time here. Examples that you're going to see here are of test quality and for development purposes and may not represent the most secure best practices. Again, take a look at 1Password's documentation about the most secure practices. So what is this 1Password server? Well, it is a Dockerized application or server that sits in between 1Password and any application that wants to access it through a REST API. And that serves as the liaison between 1Password and the rest of the world. This will need to be set up before you're able to do any REST API calls, since 1Password, as a web application, doesn't have a REST API in and of itself. It's this Connect server that handles the incoming REST API calls and relays those back to 1Password. So you will need to set up a Connect server on your own. It's not difficult to do. It sits in Docker, so it could sit in your AWS or Google Cloud or Azure environments as a Dockerized application, and you would make calls to the Connect server. And we will use the IP address of the Connect server in some of the examples that you're going to see here in just a moment. So let's see what you need to have set up in each of these two systems, Vault and 1Password, in order to get started. I'll start with Vault first, since it is shockingly straightforward. Vault is designed really to be ready to go and API ready as part of its architecture. So here I've got a number of mounts in my secrets engine. I'm going to be using for this example the one called Chris, and I've got a couple of secrets that we will be calling. That's really all you need, along with a token that can access this mount. Once you have those two things, you are really ready to go with Vault. Vault is very straightforward and was very REST API first in its architecture. Let's take a look at what we need in 1Password. Obviously, the first thing we need is a 1Password account and at least one vault. In this example, I'm going to share two vaults, or make two vaults available to the integration. And from this point in 1Password, you would come over to Integrations. If you want to create a new integration, we will click on Directory and Other. And we already have a Connect server, so we'll go ahead and click on Create a Connect server. And we will give this an environment name. We'll call this Webinar for the purposes of this discussion. And we will choose some of the vaults. We'll leave Chris's vault alone, and we will just use these test vaults and update vaults. We'll then add an environment. I will give a token name. We will call this the webinar token. And we'll give it a reasonable expiration time of 30 days. This is one that we may choose to roll frequently for security purposes. And for this access token, we will select both of these. And we'll say issue token. For the purposes of this webinar, we'll use the secrets automation test environment. It's one that I have already set up and already with the token installed in Tines. But you would take that token that you receive from the last step, and you will go into credentials. We'll create a credential. It'll be a text credential, and that will be, you can name it whatever you want to, but 1Password token. And the name cannot start with a number, so we will call this 1Password like this. We'll paste in the value, and we can share this token with any of the teams that are needed in order to create or in order to exchange information with 1Password. I'm going to make this available to all of my teams and save. So now that we have integration keys for both 1Password and for HashiCorp Vault in Tines, how do we make an HTTP request in order to pull credentials from each of these systems? That's what I'm going to show you right now. With 1Password, we're going to copy some information from the URL bar in order to populate the URL for the request that we're going to make for 1Password. It's a little bit tough to follow, but this section here is the Vault ID, and this section is the item ID. We're going to use those two pieces of information in order to populate the vaults and the item ID of our URL. Now with HashiCorp Vault, it's a little bit more straightforward. All they want to see is the mount and the name of that secret, and we're going to use that in the naming convention to pull that information. So that might have been a little bit difficult to see on the slide. So let's walk through what that looks like in a real life example. So again, we are at that mount called Chris. I have two secrets in this mount. Both of these are key value pairs in this mount. So I've got a key value pair called testpw1, and here's my password, and that password is being securely saved. So how do I get that from HashiCorp Vault? Well, we'll create a credential. It'll be a if we were to do a new credential, we would do an HTTP request. I have one set up here for my test password, and this is a reference to the Vault secret. So again, instead of saving that secret in Tines and our key management system, what we want to do is pull that dynamically when we need it from HashiCorp Vault and use that in our story, so that if it changes in HashiCorp Vault, then we don't need to synchronize it with Tines. So we will create a URL with the form, the URL to the Vault, and port 8200. V1 is the current version of the API. Then we'll use the mount, which in this case is called Chris, and a static bit of text called data, and the name of that secret, which in this case is testpw1. We will use application JSON as our content type. We will use a get method. There won't be anything in the payload. And if we are, and of course, we'll need that HashiCorp Vault token. This is the token that has access to this particular amount. So if we click on Run Options, what that will do is run this HTTP request, and HashiCorp Vault has returned back information about test password 1. I can expand this to say, all right, the information that I need is in this data, and it's also in this bit of data, and here is my key value pair. So here's the key PW that corresponds to the key that we see here, and the password, which is the super secure password 1234. Nobody's ever guessing that. I don't even know why I keep it in a secrets vault. But if we want to pull this information, which is to say I want this data. So if I wanted the full key value pair, I would say go give me this data, and I could double click this in order to copy that path to the clipboard. If all I wanted was the password, which is really what I want in this case, I'm going to double click on the key, and we will paste that right into the location of the token from response. That is going to go here, and I will save that. And as we go through this discussion, you're going to see this pop up as we save these credentials. And what it's asking us is, we're encouraging you to use a domain restricted credential. And what it's saying here is, where do you want this credential to actually be used? And by restricting this to a specific domain, it's more secure, and that way users can't actually access it in any way other than to a HTTP request for this specific domain. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to leave this blank and accept those messages. And that is how we create a credential for Vault. So let's see what constructing the HTTP request looks like over on the 1Password side. So over in 1Password in the web application, I've selected a secret that I want to create an HTTP request for. And there's two important pieces of information that I need here. One of them is this Vault ID, and the second being this item ID. So I'll need those two pieces of information in order to construct the URL for this HTTP request. So I have an example for Bank of Tynes and this password. And here it is. So I've given it a name. Again, this is an HTTP request type. We'll give it a URL, which has the shape of HTTP or HTTPS, preferably HTTPS with a port of 8443. In this case, I'm just using a test service, so for, again, developer quality for the purposes of this discussion, but I encourage you to use the best practices from 1Password's documentation. So we've got the HTTP and the URL or the domain name or the IP address of the 1Password server. And then again, it takes the shape of v1 and vaults, and then that vault ID, and then items and the item ID. We'll complete the HTTP request with a content type of JSON. It'll be using the get method. That's not surprising. The payload is empty, and we've got some header information. It'll accept application JSON, and we'll have authorization with the bearer token of that 1Password token that we set up during the automation step. So if we have that all set up and everything works correctly, if we click on the Run Options button, it'll reach out to the 1Password server and it will return our secret. So this is the form that 1Password uses. In the body, it will give us a number of fields for our password type. In this case, it gives us some useful information and some less useful information. So we want the ID that is a password. We've got the value, which is what we really want to get to, which is this secure password again. 1Password told us that was a crummy password, and it indeed is a crummy password. So what we need to do is we need to create a formula that looks for within this fields array an item that has an ID of a password and the value. We want to grab the value from that. So the way that we construct that is we'll have a where statement that says, okay, go into the passwords array, go give me where it has a purpose of password, and then go give me the value of that password, and then that correctly returns the right item. So with that information in place, we would save that, and this would be a ready-to-use credential. Again, if the credential changes in 1Password, Tynes is dynamically picking up that information so that we don't have to synchronize between two different key management systems. Now, this feels a little bit fiddly, doesn't it, as far as getting credentials set up either in Vault or in 1Password, even a little bit more fiddly in 1Password. But you know what? That's what we have automation for. And we can use Tynes in order to improve the management of our secrets. And this is how we do it. So since automation in general and Tines in particular is all about getting rid of tedium, getting rid of lots of clicks, getting rid of copy paste, swivel chair types of activities, wouldn't it be great if we could use Tines in order to automate the secrets management process for us? I thought so. Here's my solution. For each of the two key management systems that we've been talking about today, I created a story within Tines that not only allows me to take a look at the various vaults and the secrets within those vaults that I might want to use within a Tines story, but it also can create the credential itself in order to take care of the copy paste and the tedium that we just experienced a few minutes ago. So here is one of those stories. This is the story that allows me to add credentials from a HashiCorp Vault instance. If there are multiple mounts, I can select from a mount. If there are multiple secrets, I can select the secret to add in as a credential in Tines. And again, this is one of those HTTP requests, so I'm not actually storing the secret itself in Tines. I'm only storing a reference to that secret that I'm then asking Vault to go and return for me. If you haven't used a Pages story, Pages is a way within Tines to create a small application that's really useful, especially when we have a bit of automation plus some man in the loop that needs to happen in order to complete that automation. So here's my solution. I'm starting with a start page that tells you what's happening, then going and grabbing all of the mounts, allowing the user to select the mount that they want to pull the secret from. We'll list out the secrets and allow the user to go and select the secret of their choice. Give that secret a name, and if the name already exists, ask them do they want to give it a new name, or do they want to overwrite the reference. We will give them that opportunity, and if it works correctly, we will give it a success message, and if it is some other outcome, we will let them know that as well. It looks like this. So here's what that application looks like. I've got that start page. It'll go and load up the mounts, give me some mounts that I can select from. Here is the Chris mount, and I will select a secret. We'll give it test password 2, and that's a good name. We'll leave that name. Oh, I already have one that exists under that name, so let's create a new one with test password 3. And success. So if I go to credentials and test password 3, here is the newly created test password without all the fiddly typing and the tedium. So if you're a 1Password user, we have a very similar type of story where, again, we start with a start page. We ask to list out the vaults. If there's only one vault in that automation, we will just present that one vault. If there's more than one, then we will list out the vaults for you to select from. And similarly, once selected, we will present the items for selection. We will name that credential. Also give a little bit of information that 1Password is so kind to return for us. We might as well use that. We will check that if it's an existing credential, and if it is, then we will let the user know. Otherwise, we'll add it to Tines and give a success message, or if it's unfortunately not successful, we will let them know that as well. This looks like this. So here's that pages page. Since there was more than one vault in our automation, we will select the security team secrets. And remember, I had that bank of tines. Maybe I'll select super secret this time. I will make sure that it's not using a name that I have already used. So I'll give it super secret 2. Also putting in a description so that people who are following us knows that this is a reference to a 1Password Vault password and not just a regular credential that somebody put in by hand. 1Password also gave us a little bit of information, which I am including here just for informational purposes. We'll go ahead and submit that. And success. Super secret was added to this team. So in credentials, super secret was added with all the information that we needed from the URL, as well as the filter, so we didn't have to recreate that as well. So you may be asking, Chris, do I need to go and create this all on my own? Do I have to go and re-engineer this? The great answer is you don't. One of the great things about Tines is our story library. So if you want to use the 1Password story that I just used here, all you have to do is search stories, go to 1Password, create credentials that reference 1Password vaults, and this should look very familiar. This is the story that I just used. So if you want to use that in your environment, all you have to do is click on Import to Tenant, select your tenant, and it will be added directly to your tenant. And then you can modify it to your needs, or you can use it as is. There's some directions on how to set up the initial settings so that you're ready to go. But follow those instructions, and you will be set to use it. A story library story will be posted momentarily, probably at the same time as the release of this webinar, that has the Vault story as well. So you can use that just by importing it to your tenant in the same way. So we appreciate you tuning into this webinar. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We're on the community Slack. You can reach out to your customer success managers, to your account executives, or even to your sales engineers like myself. I'm Chris Kohanek, and thanks again.